In these weeks after Easter, we're pondering the appearances of Jesus in chapter 20 and chapter 21 of the Gospel of John, these accounts of interacting with Jesus after he was raised from the dead. And today we have this really remarkable one. As 1 Corinthians said in our other reading, the resurrection is the absolute center of the Christian faith. Everything stands and falls upon the resurrection of Jesus. Now, Richard Dawkins gave a really interesting interview on the UK TV this week. If you don't know who Richard Dawkins is, he wrote a very famous book, The God Delusion. He's one of the four horsemen of the New Atheism, is what he's named as. There's four of them. But he came out in Easter time in the UK and talking about the future of culture in England in particular. And he was, despite the fact that he has spent his whole life convincing people that Christianity is not true and that you should not really worry about God, he said fascinatingly in this interview that he calls himself a cultural Christian. And that he would very much be dismayed if Britain was taken over by another faith. Really interesting stuff. For him, what is in the Christian faith is the best way for a society to live. What was interesting is in the rest of the interview, he went on to clarify with the interviewer, it's not that I believe any of it. I don't think any of it's true, which is a really interesting position. He said, I don't believe in the resurrection of Jesus, for example. He turned on the interviewer and says, do you believe in the resurrection of Jesus, the poor thing? And she said, well, I want to believe, but I'm not sure. It's a really interesting moment. Dawkins kind of realizing the place of Christianity and its importance in Western culture, perhaps, but an inability to come at it on personal terms. What do you do with that? Well, the story today in the resurrection scene where Jesus appears to Mary, what you see is that actually, if you want to go to the heart of why Christianity works in a culture, what's so beautiful and stunning about it, it's not made of ideas, actually. The Christian faith is premised upon the person of Jesus. Christian faith is upheld by personally interacting with him. The resurrection is no mere idea to be debated. It is about a person who impacts us personally and summons us to know him. Without that, the Christian faith doesn't work, and cultural Christianity will ultimately fall apart. So let's consider that today and have a look at Mary and her incredible encounter with Jesus at the tomb. 3 things quickly today. The first is you see in this story how the resurrection overturns personal grief. Mary arrives at the tomb not expecting any miracles at all. She arrives just a complete sobbing mess. She sits at the tomb and she looks inside and she sees Jesus' body there, and for her, he's not there, and she realizes that that's just a reason for more grief. She was a personal witness to Jesus' crucifixion. She saw him die in agony, and it's like his missing body, it's like extending the shame and the torture of the cross. For her, the missing body of Jesus means that his torture, his end is not over. And personally, it is just an awful grief to her. She's kind of collapsing under the disaster of losing someone she loved. And so she sits at the tomb weeping, and she's so lost in grief and pain and tears that she doesn't even notice 2 angels are talking to her, which is crazy. 2 angels talk to her and she kind of just palms them off. Why are you crying? They asked. They've taken my Lord away, and I don't know where they've put him. Her answer is personal. She's attached to his body, to the uniqueness and preciousness of his life. She wants him, his physical body, to be where it should be. In her love, we see our own loves, our own weeping, our own losses, the preciousness and fragility of life. That to lose someone is a personal thing, an awful thing, in whatever way we might lose them. Mary's grief is our grief, our tears. This is a real world scene of a disaster and a loss. But it is a scene about that grief being overturned into joy, of it being undone, of all the pain and grief of the world being undone. It is no mistake that Mary, when she names Jesus, John adds this little thing in here. Mary doesn't notice it's Jesus, thinking he was the gardener. Now that's not an incidental little word John has chosen. John is trying to name the scene here. It's a garden tomb. Another garden. A second garden. The first garden was Eden with Eve. The second garden is Mary around Jesus' grave. And the second garden, the renewing, the beginning, the starting again has happened in the resurrection of Jesus. You see, if the resurrection of Jesus can overturn the torture and execution of a crucifixion, then there is no terror or darkness or fear in this world that Jesus has not pierced with his light and life. In The Lord of the Rings, the wizard Gandalf falls down a mine shaft and they think that they've lost him. But then one day, Sam the Hobbit wakes up from his own sleep of sickness and sees Gandalf in front of him again. And says, "Gandalf, I thought you were dead. I thought I was dead." Are all of the sad things coming untrue? Gandalf said, "A great darkness has departed." And he laughed, and the laugh was like water falling on parched ground. This is what the resurrection means. It's the overturning of a personal grief that Mary had with Jesus. But it is the overturning of every grief, every sadness, every darkness, every death. The resurrection is the unwinding of all the sad things in the world in the wonderful power of Jesus' resurrection. That's the first thing we see here. But the second thing we see here is not just a body restored, but an intimacy restored. I love this interaction between Mary and Jesus. We already see Mary's attachment to Jesus. "My Lord, they have taken my Lord away," she says to the angels. "Why are you crying?" Jesus says to her. "Who is it you're looking for?" "Sir, if you've carried him away, tell me where you've put him and I'll get him." And Jesus said to her, "Mary." I love this moment. You know, that some people say our names in a way that no one else can. Our mums, our dads, our friends, our partners perhaps, people who've known us all our life. Sometimes the way they speak to us, there's no other way of doing it. It's unique and it's precious to them and to us. And here, Jesus speaks Mary's name in a way no one else can. No one else ever has. And the speaking of her name pierces the darkness of her grief and lights her up again. It restores Jesus to Mary and Mary to Jesus. In one word, Jesus says, "Mary, the most awful endings can be undone. Mary, here I am again, alive. Mary, you haven't lost me. Mary, you can never lose me. Mary, it's okay, the horror, it's over. A new life has come." And I love what Mary does next. She calls out to him and she just grabs him, just grabs his legs, as if she never wants to let him go again. She is attached to him. Jesus to her is no abstract thought. He's a concrete person. He's someone to be loved and adored and known. The resurrection isn't something abstract. It's not an idea. It's about mothers receiving back lost sons again. It's about the elderly who get lost in the fog of dementia, re-emerging whole in themselves again. It's about those friends we tragically lost in ways we shouldn't have, just showing up again one day. There is a wonder to resurrection, to Jesus' resurrection. The wonder of receiving someone back from the dead and coming into an intimacy with them again. It's personal. There's wonder in the resurrection. You know, it's like waking up from one of those awful dreams. Have you had those dreams? When I was first married, I had this dream I kept having where in our apartment there was a home invasion. And in the home invasion, I didn't know where Cass was. And I'm there, and there's the cloaked figure, and there's a gun over me, and I'm like, thinking I'm going to die, thinking Cass is already dead, thinking everything's gone and lost. But then you wake up. And for a moment, you're in the midst of the terror. But then you feel the light on your face of the sun. You look over, she's there, I'm here, we're okay, we're safe. I think that's what it might feel like to wake up resurrected. With the terror gone, with the people you love there, with a new intimacy and relationship with them restored. But the third thing we see here is that it's not just a person-to-person intimacy. There's a new intimacy that we're offered here. Jesus kind of brushes Mary off. Well, not really. He says, don't hold on to me. Let go, Mary. Let go of my legs. I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I'm ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and to your God. It seems a bit harsh, like he's just come back. Like, give her a moment, Jesus. But what Jesus actually says here is exactly the thing that Mary would want to hear. He says, I'm going to the Father, I'm ascending into heaven. But what does he say? He doesn't say his Father only. Or he say, my Father and what? Your Father. My God and whose God? Your God. And what does he say about the brothers? They're my brothers. Through the death and resurrection of Jesus, his Father becomes our Father. His God, our God. He becomes ours. We have a new intimacy with God. Jesus goes up to the Father only to pour out the Spirit and send himself into our very hearts. And the Father with him to live with us. As he said in John 14, my Father will love them, and we will come to them and make our home with them. You see, the death and resurrection of Jesus not only secures us our own resurrection, it invites us into this intimacy, the intimacy that Mary had with Jesus. That intimacy is ours. That we might cling to him, grow affection for him, love and know him, and walk with him, hand in hand, in and through life. The resurrection promises us this intimacy that Mary received back with Jesus and summons us to take hold of it. The resurrection is not an idle, abstract idea. Jesus is alive, and he wants to walk with you. He wants you to be his and his to be yours, to claim you as his own, for you to grab onto his feet as Mary does here, and to walk prayerfully and closely with him. Friends, Jesus is actually alive. And he now belongs to you. You now belong to him.